This is Get Your Entrepreneurship Together, where you'll find stories, tips, and value from successful entrepreneurs who are out there crushing it. Here's a short preview of this week's episode.
No, that scarcity mindset, it's not just a one-person show. Like, everybody contributes to it, right?
How would you help people see more of the opportunities, even in a depressed economy when nobody's buying?
I actually call it an addiction in a sense, because you can become addicted to chasing all these new things. And if I just waited 24 hours, I can tell you right now, I wouldn't have done that.
And welcome back to the show, everyone. My name is Brian Elam. I will be your host here on Get Your Entrepreneurship Together. And today, this is going to be a jam-packed value conversation. I just know it because Scott Allen is here. And Scott is what I would consider to be an expert. Not only is he an expert, he's a prolific author, and he is also passionate about helping people improve their lives in many different aspects. So we've only got about 50 minutes with this man here today. I'm pumped about this conversation. We're going to get as much value out of him as possible. So we're just going to dive right in. Scott, thank you so much for coming on. It's an honor to have you.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
100%. So just so people have a little bit more idea of, your background, your experience, on the About page on your site, there was a couple, I guess, job descriptions is how I would say it, that I didn't really recognize. So to help people get an understanding again of your background, what you do, what in the heck is a corporate business trainer?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from Canada, but I have been living in Japan for the past 25, I think going on 26 years now. And when I came over here, I was initially brought over by a company that has a string of schools across Japan to teach corporate business English. And basically what that is they line us up with companies, they give us a company car, and they send us out to these corporations to teach, we'll call it business English, which is how they termed it. But to clarify what that is that we were training their employees or their executives to travel overseas to do business in other countries. So a lot of the training that we did was in these companies. We would go there, do presentation shows, and basically give them the cultural experience before they actually went over to, say maybe they're going to Germany or the US, or, they could be going anywhere in the world. And this was quite, I did that for quite a long time. I think I was doing that for about 10 or 15 years, actually, and running a business school here in just outside of Osaka, where I live. So, yeah, the corporate business trainer, that's really, when I boil it down to one thing, it was really just helping the executives to understand the culture that they were going into so that they could just do business a whole lot better, and I think it had a positive impact on their business. Most of the companies were, they were big companies too. Sometimes it was, Panasonic, or could have been Toyota or Mitsubishi, like a lot of these companies that have other, branches set up or plants. Sometimes they were, Toyota, like car factories, things like that. So it was a good job. It was exciting. And I learned a lot from it as well. I think that overall it made me a better speaker, like a better public speaker, because I often had to give large presentations in front of big crowds and things like that. So I really enjoyed it, but I did step away from that back in 2019 to pursue my writing and coaching career full time. So
Excellent. Yeah. And I'm sure that they found, your services valuable, because if the shoe is being on the other foot, and my understanding is there's a lot of intricacies when it comes to how to do business in Japan and how to interact with people when you're doing business. Is that correct?
yeah, that is correct. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's never they don't say things directly. It's kind of indirectly in this way of dancing around the actual conversation in a sense. So that was one of the things that we had to cover in a lot of the training is that, and myself too, like, well, here's a little bit more about my background is that that was not my, my background was not in, business administration or anything like that. When I was living back in Canada, I was actually an electrical engineer. So when I decided to travel overseas and I made that a dream that I started to pursue back in like, 25, 30 years ago. I just ended up getting hired by a company for the only reason that I could at the time. Well, first of all, character probably had something to do with it, character, personality, and the fact that I could speak English, because that's really what they were looking for is just, a fluent native speaker that they could bring over and train for this position. So, but yeah, I don't have an education in or a background in education or business administration. So I had to learn these things as like the business side of it anyway. I had to learn these things just through doing it, really, which is how I learned most things. So.
Right, right. And so how did you start getting into the world of self-improvement and making your way towards becoming an author and a coach?
Great question. Well, the self-improvement thing came about way back, probably when I was, I'd say about 30 years ago. I was probably about 23, 24, 25. During that period, I was into a lot of partying and stuff like that. And at the time, I had to go into recovery for alcoholism, and I went into recovery for a long time. Like, yeah, I was in recovery for, quite a long time. Basically, it was great because I got my head straight. And one of my sponsors at the time, aside from the big book that they wanted us to read, which I think was really my first self-help book that I read, a friend of mine gave me a book by Tony Robbins called Awaken the Giant Within. And it was one of these, like that book's been around for 30 years, but I started reading this book. I learned so much from it, right? And it's like I'd never read, like a personal development book before. I knew about Tony Robbins and other like, Brian Tracy and Jim Rohn and, some of the bigger gurus around that time. And of course, Tony's still around. But I read that book cover to cover, and when I did, I decided to set my life on a different trajectory. Instead of going out and partying all the time and just like blowing my money and my mind on all that, I decided to go the other way. And I said, I'm gonna make my life into something better, great. I just believed that I could do this thing. And so what happened is I read the book and I started to put together this vision, or this vision just came about where it's like I wanted to one of the things I wanted to do, there are three things. One is I wanted to write books, which had been a dream of mine since I was in junior high school. Love putting stories together and writing and things like that. And I had quit that for a long time. And the second thing is I wanted to travel the world. And then there's like these list of goals that I'd written out in this journal. And there's a long list of them, but like three of them were like, yeah, write books, travel the world. I think the third thing is I just wanted to get better as a human being, which I realized was going to be a lifelong journey. But I was in for it, right? So, I was totally into that. So what happened is, yeah, I read that book, got my goals together, decided I'm going to go traveling around the world. And when I made that decision, it was just this definitive decision that once I made it, I said, okay, I'm going to do this 1 year from now. And it's probably back in like 96, probably 97, I think, because I came here in 98. And certain, like, sure enough, 1 year later, I was living here. There's more of a story to it, actually. But once I made that decision, I remember one day I was looking in the newspaper back when we had newspapers, and I just opened up the newspaper to this random page. And right there on that page in the center of it was this big advertisement that said teach English in Japan, apply now. And so if you believe in the power of synchronicity and the universe was probably working with me somehow, I thought that's it, and because here's this thing, I was planning on going overseas anyway, but I didn't really have much of a plan. I was like, I was going to go to Thailand, just go backpacking, sell my stuff, I mean, that was the plan, right? But I was going to do it no matter if I had $5 in my pocket, I was getting on a plane. That's how determined I was. But just turned out that I ended up applying for this position in Japan. And but a month later, they contact me, ended up meeting this Japanese businessman who had flown all the way from Tokyo to meet with a bunch of people to interview them for this position. He was meeting people in this big hotel in downtown Vancouver. So that was it. I had the interview, got the job. They hired three people out of like, I don't know how many interviews they did, like hundreds, brought us over. And I guess that was destiny. So, but the whole self-help thing, but just getting back to that is that I was still reading the books and still following up on, but I believe that the reason that I was able to get that opportunity is because I made a decision to turn my life around, to create a better mindset. And I changed the trajectory of everything where, I could have been on the other side of things. I could have just been, out drinking all the time on the weekends, and that was only going to last so long anyways. And once I got things cleaned up and everything just became more clear as to the direction I want to take everything, just kind of fell into place. But again, it always came back to making those decisions that changed everything. So
Yeah, and I'm glad that you went into that because that's something that I wanted to ask you about is making a decision and the power behind that. Because it's happened in my life too. When I made the decision to leave my former career as a massage therapist and go into the financial side of the insurance business, when I made that decision, all of a sudden a job just appeared in front of me, just like you opening up that newspaper. Oh, here it is. Here's your opportunity to fulfill what you said you wanted to do. And I literally just got chills all over my body right now thinking about that synchronicity. So, yeah, if you're listening to this and you're thinking or wondering, am I making the right decision? It feels good, it feels right, but am I making it? Is it possible? Don't stick in your head about that. Start looking outside in your world and paying attention and see if you see those synchronicities show up. Because if they do, you're on the right track. And I'm sure you would agree with that, Scott.
yeah. And I think also, I mean, call it the power of manifestation, but I realized so when this was happening too, like just, oh, coincidentally getting the job here. And then, but even going way back before that, I mean, every time I decided to do something, and it was the same later with book publishing as well. It's like, yeah, I made a decision to, like, when I finally got serious about, sitting down and writing the book is like at the time, and this is probably what, I'd already been living here like for like a decade or so. And it's like, I was getting a bit restless and I was like, what's the next thing? I started to think through it's like, and I remembered, oh yeah, I was going to write those books. Right. And I realized like something again was just like this energy was just pulling me towards that dream that I've always had, even though I'd been living here for 10 years, had a great life, loving the culture and just the life that I, was building, had a family at the time, by this time I'd been married, had a family and a couple of kids and dogs and everything. And but something was pulling me towards the next stage. And that was when, I was actually really a fiction author. I love fiction, always coming up with stories. When I was a kid, I was one of these kids where like I love movies, still do. If I saw a movie, like if it was like, I remember going to see Raiders of the Lost Ark, and next thing you know, I'd be at home trying to, fashion a bullwhip out of an old piece of rope or something. Like I always wanted to be these characters in the films. So my imagination would just run wild, and it was the same thing. Probably just a big kid at heart, but I was always coming up with these stories, but anyway, what happened is, of course, I was still reading self-help and personal development books because those, that material, like just always investing in that reading and that training kept me on track, right? So when it came down to this, like, well, and I was writing fiction and I had a couple of books already and I was gonna go find a publisher, but something in me said, no, you've got to write this self-help book. And it's like, do this first and then maybe come back to, writing your kind of like your Jack Reacher series, whatever it was I was working on at the time. So that's what I did is I decided I just made a pivot, put together a plan for a self-help book, spent like 3 or 4 years just writing material. But it was just, again, it came back to making a definitive decision that I've got to do this thing. Like it just wouldn't let me go, I mean, and I did push it off for a while. I was like, oh, I'll do that, I'm going to write that book someday. And the thing is like I was starting to tell people about it. And when you start talking about something, you start to believe it, something just takes hold, right? And one day I think my friend of mine has said, so where's this book you keep talking about? And I realized like I just hated the fact that I was talking about something, not actually doing it. So when I got down to doing it, I just did it, Sure, it was like, 3 or 4 years of writing and so much material. I think I had like a few books already finished by the time it was done. But that was the thing is I was like, I wasn't trying to be like the next, motivational speaker, Tony Robbins or like that. It wasn't about that. I just felt compelled that this is the one thing I absolutely had to do no matter what. Just even if it meant just, publishing my book. And this was even before self-publishing. Eventually I did end up self-publishing the books, and then they ended up getting picked up by publishers. But at the time, it was like I just wanted to write the book, get it out there somehow. And that was just the manifestation of that vision. I just didn't let it go, So I don't know. I think there's something to be said for that. It was just some people call it the law of attraction. Maybe it's like the other phrase for it, but I think it's like manifesting a dream that you're holding on to, and you just keep feeding into it every day. So
That's great stuff. Great stuff. Absolutely. And I love that you said that speaking about it, speaking into it helps, because when you do that, like you said, you talk about it with other people, and now you've got other people that are helping to hold you accountable, help keep you moving forward, or crack that Indiana Jones bullwhip when you're just sitting on your hands versus writing.
for sure.
Yeah. And so, on that vein, obviously, with all of this knowledge and you being a coach and helping people as well, is that why you call yourself a transformational success strategist? Is that because of all the trainings and everything that you've gone through and your ability to help people, or is that something else?
I think that and that was a term that I may have coined, but I always had this approach too, like if you're not going, the one thing you have to do, I think, is you have to give yourself the power to really go out there and just basically say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. If you wait for someone to, I don't know, call you successful, or for someone to say, hey, you finally made it, like I'm under the impression that, you have to get out there and really, how do I coin it? Like, you have to get out there and sell yourself. You have to get out there and basically say, like, I just went out there and said, hey, I'm a successful author and I've sold like 1 million books. Like, even if I hadn't sold that many books yet, I'm going to be telling people that I did, because if I do, maybe eventually I will sell that many books. So even before I was publishing anything, I was telling people it wasn't a lie. It was just like I had to manifest myself I had to put myself into the future. Right. And I was telling people well, what books have you published? Like, that makes sense. So anyway, coming back to the transformational success strategist, well, that actually comes back to when I got my mindset straight and everything like that, and I got help back in the day. I had transformed my journey, right? And then when I came to Japan, I started working in a new kind of field, actually, that I had no experience in whatsoever. So I had to transform my career, basically, right? Or if I didn't succeed, they were going to maybe send me home or something. I don't know. And then later when I became an author, it was like, well, I don't have any experience in writing, but I'm going to do this thing anyway. So again, I had to transform another career and become that thing that I wanted to. So everything was always about, transforming my current situation into something greater that I wanted to have later on. The success strategist part of that, yes, came later when I did start, once I started publishing, and then I started to actually coach people through this. I was coaching them through how to become a character or individual in their career, in their life. And also, I help a lot of people with like book publishing as well. So a lot of that is really just like the mindset. The transformation of the mindset is so powerful, because I look at the mindset as it's like your GPS, right? You have to program it. It'll move you in any direction that you want it to, but you have to know which direction you're moving in. Just like when you get in the car, we have these. Well, I don't. Most people maybe have a GPS. We have that on our phones, but I mean, unless we actually plug in the coordinates and say I'm going here, we're really just going to end up anywhere. So I was always aware of that. Like, if you have to make a decision, like decide, maybe you don't need to know exactly where you're going. Like, at least if you're kind of like in the same ballpark, and later on, you can focus in on, your exact position. But you have to have a pretty good idea of what direction you're moving in. And part of that, the success strategist comes in with, knowing, like having a strategy for your life, for your plan, actually, and hey, sometimes like we don't always know like the entire, like we don't know every step of the journey, but at least you have to be willing to take that first step on the journey. And like I said, coming back to the manifestation part, well, if you know that you're going to be taking the road less traveled, sometimes you just need to take that first step on that road less traveled. Because that's the journey is like really not knowing what that next step is a lot of the times. So,
Yeah, you're 100% right. You can't see the forest for the trees, in other words. But if you know that you want to get to the other side, you just have to put one foot in front of the other and start. And, with this channel obviously being focused on entrepreneurship and helping people level up themselves in their businesses, going back to the mindset talk, one of the things that entrepreneurs have to deal with, especially, is rejection. And you
mm,
have a book called Rejection Free for Life.
mhm.
And does that mean that once you read this book and go through your trainings that you'll never get rejected again?
Great question. No, it's actually the opposite. It's being able to handle the rejection when it happens, because it's not a question of if it happens, but when it happens. That's probably book number two in the series. I think the first one is Rejection Reset, Rejection Free. And in fact, just last night I was working on the third book in that series called Rejection Rehab. So basically, that topic of rejection, when I started to do the research, well, here's what happened actually with that. I'll circle back to the scope of the book and why it matters. But um, I think that was probably maybe my third book in. And I remember I had joined this writing challenge, and the challenge was, write a book in 90 days. And so I'm trying to come up with this concept for the book, and I was talking to my mentor at the time, and he said, "Well, just write about something that you know about, like something you experience. You don't have to try and invent something new, right?" He's like, "What's the one thing that you've always gone through throughout your life?" And it's like, well, oh, rejection. Like I'm terrified of that, like even though I'm terrified of it, or not terrified of it, it's just like, I think all of us like we're kind of uncomfortable when we get told no. You go for that job interview and you don't get the job interview. And I remember I didn't get a lot of them, those interviews that I applied for and or those jobs I applied for, and always feeling afterwards like, oh, yeah, I'm worthless. I'm no good. I wish I had more education. And you start to beat yourself up for it. Well, here's the thing is like, maybe I didn't get that job, but then I went for another job interview, and the job that I did get was actually way better than the job I'd been rejected for. So even though rejection was one of those things where, yeah, it stung a little bit, it always led me to something greater. So rejection free for life. Rejection free is just the concept that you're going to get rejected, but you're going to see it as an opportunity in your life. And it may not always seem that way when you really want something and you get rejected. It's hard to see it as a good thing. But hey, it's not always a personal attack on your character either, because there could be things at play again in the universe. Not to sound woo-woo, but a lot of it was really like I feel like sometimes there's just something at some kind of energy that was at play here that I had no control over no matter what, Hey, if they didn't, I'm just using, a job interview as an example. And there's a lot of things. It was going back to being an entrepreneur or book publishing. I had sent my book out to several publishers actually, again, just before Amazon launched their self-publishing platform, and I ended up self-publishing because I just wanted to get the book out there. I was sending the book out to publishers, and sure, I had quite a few rejection letters. I had one that was maybe interested, but again, I was never been published before. So, but yeah, I get these rejection letters. It's like, okay, well, and the first few of them, and here's the thing too, is like the first couple of them are really, like, and you got that letter in the mail. It's like, if they sent you a letter at all, it's like, okay, I'm just going to keep trying with this, But after the first few, three or four of them, actually didn't bother me anymore. And I just realized, oh, okay, this is just the way it is. So I just kept sending out more of them, right? And I realized, like, wow, the more I got rejected, the less it actually hurt. So it comes down to like this, I was reading this thing around called exposure therapy. It was like, the more you want to get, if you want to get really good at something, just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Like, in other words, failing as you go or failing forward, which led into one of my other books, like Fail Big. Like the concept behind that, similar to rejection, is like, it's not about, avoiding failure. It's about dealing with it when it shows up and just being okay with it. Like failure is part of the process. So is getting rejected. They really go hand in hand. So rejection free for life is just that, yeah, it's not, it's not never getting rejected again. It's just opening yourself up to the idea that, hey, I'm okay with this. I'm going to get rejected for a lot of things. But again, it's rejection is a bit of a, we kind of look at it as a little bit of a nasty, me, it comes across as a, a negative, definition, I think, but it really comes down to how you frame it, so and I just, and again, when it comes to entrepreneurship, there are a lot of mistakes I made, a lot of failures I had, a lot of rejections I had, I apply for a lot of podcast interviews, and sometimes they just say, no, we don't like your book description. We don't like your description, or we don't like, you're just not a fit for the show. And sometimes I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that kind of hurt, but okay, who's next? And I'm like, okay, who wants to have me on their show? So, 8 times out of 10, I'll get onto a podcast interview, but occasionally, like, they will reject me. And yeah, sometimes, that still stings a bit. But then I realized, like, hey, that's all right. Maybe another time, right? So you just have to frame it up as it's just one of those things that's going to happen. Just move on to the next thing, because somebody eventually is going to say yes.
There you go. There you go. Great description. I'm glad you went in depth on that because, yeah, it is definitely hard as entrepreneurs when you put yourself out there with your business, your baby, and people say they don't want it or they're not interested. Yeah, it definitely does sting. But like you said, the more you do it, the less it stings. And the universe is always working for you to bring you the opportunity that is correct. So
Mm,
glad we went down that road. Good value nuggets there. Now we're going to move right on to another topic of entrepreneurship, which is money.
mm,
Everybody wants money. Everybody needs money. One of my slogans is good people deserve lots of money. So I definitely believe that. But a lot of economists right now are saying that we are in or heading for an even bigger crash of our economic state here in the United States.
mm.
And that typically causes a lot of fear in people. They tend to start pulling away, not investing, not trying to grow. How would you guide someone to look at this time as more of an opportunity instead of pushing back from the table in order to bring in and create more financial abundance?
Yeah. The thing for me, like, it comes down to one of the things that I really struggled with is the scarcity mindset, right? So what happens with most of us, I think, yes, in uncertain times and in certain times, is that we have this scarcity mindset that what happens, and I go through this all the time, is one of my biggest struggles, actually. Even way back is, when I started this thing, like, I mean, I got into this when I didn't have any money, actually. In fact, I was selling toy cars online just to pay for my first book publication, right? So going back to that is like, I realized that in order for me to move forward, I had to have the cash to put up for things, right? And I didn't always have it. So what happened is, when cash is tight, and I think it's always, it should always, like, as entrepreneurs, we're always looking for ways to, yes, make money is what we do, but also adding value to the world. And the thing is like, let's just say we live in uncertain times and we don't know, what tomorrow is going to bring. The economy is crashing and all these things. And it's like, well, when is it a good time to invest? When is it a good time to invest in your business? And what happened with me is, like, when things are uncertain, I stop investing. I stop investing in my business. And then, because I think, I'm going to save, save, save. And what happens is that I stop adding value to the world, right? So to me, like, my framework, like my mindset around money, is really one of those things I really struggled with a lot. I had to change it. And it was one of those things, even though I had done a lot of, like, yeah, I've done a lot of reading into mindset, a lot of studying into, the whole personal development side of things. The money side of things is one of the things I kind of avoided because I was really afraid of it, right? Even though I was really good at making money, and that was, one of the things, like, I could pursue that path to get money, put it back into my business or spend it on something. But when it actually came to, being able to use money to create more value in the world, that's something that I had to go from scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset. In other words, instead of focusing on how much money am I going to make this year, I'm going to make, let's just say, if I have a goal to make, $500,000 this year, or 200,000, whatever it may be, right? That became my focus. And I thought that was a goal, right? Like deciding how much money I'm going to make. And what I found out is that that actually, that I think that did more harm than good because I ended up making, even if I made that much money, I didn't feel great. It wasn't like, well, what was the value I put out into the world? So to me, it's like you've got to focus on the value. So again, coming back to the economy, things are uncertain. And one of the things is like we'll always have these uncertain times, right? It's always going to be up or down, or I mean, when is the stock market ever like on an even keel, you know? So, when it's up, we're great, and when it's down, we're not, but and I'm not saying that people shouldn't be somewhat frugal, and if you have heavy credit card debt, like try to pay that stuff off. Like I always pay off my credit cards every month. It's like because I've gotten into trouble, and I've gotten my business into trouble by kind of going into debt that way. But here's the thing is when I switched my mindset from, and I have to do this every day. It's like the question I ask myself is, how am I going to bring value into the world? In other words, who am I going to show up for? What products am I going to create to put out into the world that can help people with their business, with their lives, with their families? That's become my number one driver. But I have to train this thing every day, like literally, like, massaging a sore muscle or, massaging them like, I go to the gym all the time, right? But you have to keep going to the gym to build your muscles. And this muscle is the same thing. It's like I have to feed into it every day. Because if I'm focused on that, I'm going to build more value, which means building more wealth. But the trick is like once wealth becomes the like the number one thing is like I'm going to make this money without thinking about how you're going to get there. Um, I just never really it just never took hold for me. So,
Yeah, one of my mentors, one of the things that he said when it came to money and having an abundant mindset is money needs a purpose. You
mm,
can't just, like you said, you can't just set a goal like, oh, I want to make 500 grand this year. Well, why?
mm,
Why are you doing that? How are you going to do that? And like you said, what value are you going to add out in the world in order to do that? And yeah, we get kind of stuck, especially when the economy starts shrinking back or we start hearing that the sky is falling, whatever. We get skittish, we get reserved, and we want to naturally pull back. But I think it was Warren Buffett who said, you want to invest, you want to buy while the money is cheap.
mm,
So when
mm, mm.
everything is cheap, that's when you want to buy. When the economy crashes, when the stock market crashes, the housing market crashes, start buying real estate. Stock market crashes, start buying Amazon, start buying Apple when it's cheap. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So these are the shifts that you've got to have if you want to have more. And part
Yes.
of part of thriving in that kind of economy is seeing those opportunities that most people don't see or
Mhm.
won't see because they're stuck in that lack mentality. How would you help people see more of the opportunities, even in a depressed economy when nobody's buying?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, like again, coming back to the abundance mindset, it's like, well, if I'm not investing in the economy, in my own future, in the future of my company, like those things, then at what stage am I going to be investing in it, right? So again, like you said, if we're holding off until the economy is good, things are going to be more expensive, right? So I look for opportunities like you don't have to find something that's going to be costing you a ton of money. Maybe real estate's not the thing for some people, but I'm always looking for the things that people are giving up on. It might be could be a business out there where somebody's like, yeah, I can't afford to run this business anymore, but that could actually be a profitable business, and they're making that decision because the economy is like, yeah, it's not going very well. They're afraid to invest in it because everybody's kind of like, when we hear these things happening, we actually put more fuel into that. I think that a lot of the results of the economy going down is when people start to, that scarcity mindset. It's not just a one person show. Like everybody contributes to it, right? But the few that don't, the few that are like, yeah, okay, well, we may be in hard times, but I mean, hey, like that's the time to toughen up, right? Because that's the time to show up and be your best. So I am looking for opportunities that other people are giving up on, right? Sure, maybe it is that house that's somebody's dropped the price on, or the apartment building or something like that. But if that's the case, that's the thing that I'm going to be looking at. Sure, it's a bit of a risk maybe, but then again, Risk is what we do, right? I'm not saying you have to throw all your money into the hat for one thing, but I would just again making that mindset shift into like you got to turn your radar on. And I think for a lot of us, like when it comes to investing money, you've got to have that radar on all the time. Where like I'm now looking for those opportunities that other people are unwilling to take. And one of my I think one of the things that I live by is that I think what separates the person who's successful and people who are not, that the person who's successful, they have that grit and resilience because they're willing to do the things that most other people are not willing to do. And I think that's the separation right there. So again, if it comes down to investing or just like how to, what's the best way to like basically put your money to work? Yeah, like what you said is like you can get all this money, but if you're not a person who is responsible enough to know what to do with it. And we see this all the time, maybe with, I've never won the money lottery. I've won other lotteries, but not that one. But, if and this is actually an interesting conversation I had with my partner the other day. We are talking about money. And I said, we had $10 million. What would we do with that? Right. And we both sat there for quite a while. She actually had a really good idea, like what she would do with it. And I actually sat on it for a while. It's like $10 million. Like it was almost like, you know, I didn't really know what I would do with that much money. And I was thinking, well, probably, okay, I'd buy some real estate. I put it in the stock market like we're doing. And I had a list of things, but nothing was really definitive. And I realized like, that's a question I think a lot of people need. It doesn't have to be $10 million, by the way. This can be 10,000, like start small, because back before I had $10,000 or 50 or 100,000 is like, if I had this much money, what would I do with it? And if I'm not really sure what the answer is, chances are I maybe I just waste it or, go out and buy a Lamborghini. I don't know. But I think it's good for people just to, visualize what you would do with that money. And here's something I actually did. I ordered some, it wasn't Monopoly money, but you can buy this, like kind of realistic money on Amazon or something. And I actually bought this money and I put it in my, I just kind of like keep it in my room. And I visualized myself like, okay, if I had like this, $1 million on my table right now, how would I divide it up? Right. So I think that's an important thing. Okay. How much would I invest in the market? What would I do with how much would I give away, right? What would I contribute to, charity, etc. So I think it's really important because that builds the like not knowing what you're going to do with this money is also the key to the abundance mindset as well. Otherwise, like what happens is we become hoarders in the market, and like hoarding is the one thing that actually makes well, this just make the market worse. I think we all hoard it, and then again we're building our scarcity mindset, which is actually going to create less wealth in the future and less value as well. So
Right.
sorry, that may
Right.
have been a longer answer you're looking for, but I can really go down the rabbit trail with this. One book though that really helped me with this though was Killing Sacred Cows. Definitely a book I would recommend. Just amazing, when it sorry, the other was Garrett, I can't remember his last name, but it was just an
I can't
amazing.
either. I know who you're talking about. I actually have the ebook, and as soon as you said, I was like, oh yeah, that reminds me. I need to read that.
Yeah, that's in a book everybody should read. And Disrupting Sacred Cows, I think, came out maybe just a couple years ago. Is like the maybe the updated version or the newer version of this, but just amazing. Like, because for me, like, I've always I've had this scarcity mindset, kind of, the one thing that I was really struggling with all the time that was keeping me broke. And I think I just started tackling it in the last couple of years, and I started paying more attention to, watching a lot of, yeah, YouTube videos or interviews on money, and just really getting more interested in that world because not because I wanted to make a bunch of cash, which I mean maybe a lot of people do, but it always comes down to the question of like I want to be the kind of person who's responsible for that kind of money because you have to put yourself in that position. Otherwise, again, coming back to say the law of attraction or manifestation, it's always just going to be something you're chasing, right? And I don't want to be the person who's always like chasing the next dollar because no matter how you like, it just keeps it's always ahead of you. You never quite get enough money. It's always like, yeah, when I get that cash, then I'm going to, invest in that thing or rather. So I was always holding off until I had enough money. Then I was going to invest the money. And I realized that it doesn't quite work that way. You know, if you get $5 in your pocket, you've got to, say invest $2 of it or the $1 of it. Like I think someone had said to me, you've got to put your soldiers to work. When you get the money in the bank account, it's like it would just go out, like sure we have bills to pay and things like that. But what about the money that's just sitting in there? Oh, the scarcity mindset says you got to keep the money you got to save, save, save. So it just sits in your bank account earning 0.001% or whatever it is, right? So uh, that was that was a big challenge for me to break that habit. But I think again, like part of it was like, hearing things about the market, like there's not enough money and da da da. So I would say, if anything, take a look at your own mindset, because I think all of us have this scarcity mindset to a certain degree. I mean, I think really wealthy people, they've gotten over that for the most part. They know what to do with their money, but there's a reason why the rich have more money, and it's like, and yeah, I love listening to him, Warren Buffett on this and other people that are in the space, whether it's, Robert Kiyosaki. It's like the reason rich people have money is because they know what to do with it. Uh, anyway, yeah, like I said, I love that topic. I could probably go down the the rabbit trail more with it, but again, I would just recommend you know, getting educated around like just basically what money really means to you, and sure, you don't have to figure out what you're going to do with $10 million, but you have to figure out, what does wealth mean to me? Because once you develop that relationship, then things start to turn around. So
100%. So yeah, guys, if you have any trappings, any mental trappings when it comes to money mindset, creating wealth, lack thinking, rewind that last 5 minutes and watch it again because there are so many good questions and good points to ask yourself and address within that. So, dude, Scott, thank you so much. And I know we're running short on time here, and I've got to get one more. I've got to
sure.
get one more in. So, as entrepreneurs, another thing that we face is shiny object syndrome. And I know you're
Mm,
working on a book right now addressing this topic. So, just as long as we have left, why is this shiny object syndrome such a problem, especially for entrepreneurs?
yeah. Well, I think as creatives, we're always looking for things to work on. I'm always coming up with new ideas for other projects. In fact, I'm last night I was up late just finishing off the last rounds for this book. So the ebook's out there already on pre-order. The paperback will be ready by within a couple of days. So, but the reason this book was so like it took me so long to put this book together is because I still struggle with the shiny object syndrome. Like, starting new projects before I finish the other ones.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
raising
you
my
know,
hand on that one.
yeah. Well, investing in a new piece of software when I still haven't figured out the other thing that I'm working on, and all the time because there's something exciting about starting that new thing, right? And the
Sure.
reason it really matters for entrepreneurs is like just going back to, I think back in 2020 when we had the whole COVID thing, of course, and we all have our own stories around that year or a couple of years, but yeah, I think my business pretty much, my publishing business, when I got into it full time in 2019, almost crashed during that year because for various reasons, and nearly went broke and bankrupt and everything, and stopped publishing books. And one of the reasons is I was just chasing all this stuff, spending my money, haphazardly on all this, yeah, software I didn't need, or buying, spending money on hiring somebody to build out a funnel that I didn't need. I mean, you name it. There's just a list of things. And I was just throwing spaghetti against the wall, trying to see what sticks. But what was happening really, what it came down to is I didn't have clarity on my goals as to what I need to be doing to move things forward. So I just started doing a whole bunch of things randomly. Clarity is the key, like knowing what it is that you're trying to create, or you are creating, and then just having your goals align with that thing. And that way, if you're focused on that, you're clear on what your focus is. You're going to be able to cut out the shiny object syndrome. Like I actually called it an addiction in a sense because you can become addicted to chasing all these new things. And look, I get it. Like, if I'm working on, could be maybe I'm working on a new course or a new book or something, and it gets really hard to put this thing together. It gets hard to finish it, right? So here's what happened is that I would start a lot of these things and I would really struggle to finish them, right? Because finishing something can be really difficult, especially if you need to put more money into it or put more time into it. And so I would just go, okay, well, maybe I'll just shelf it for now, start this new project. And then that became the next shiny object, and then I had to, spend more money on that, put more time into that, hire more people for that. When what happened is I would have these unfinished tasks, on my desktop or somewhere. So like, and those things eat away at you as well. Like, I think it's really important to, finish what you start. And I know it's not easy to do that because again, I have multiple projects like a lot of entrepreneurs, but I'll tell you, like, it feels really good to finish that thing. Like this shiny object syndrome book has taken me 3 years to finish. I could
Wow.
have finished it within 6 months, but I got busy doing other stuff. I don't think like, we often say, oh, I get distracted or I got distracted, but the distraction really begins in your mind, right?
Oh yeah.
Because you're allowing yourself to become distracted with, I mean, I have 87 tabs open on my browser. It's like, I don't need that many. I can only do one thing at a time. And so I'm using that as an example, but the truth is I actually do have that many open most of the times. And it's like, well, I'm not working on 87 things at the same time. What ends up happening is every one of those tabs represents an open door. So it's an unfinished project or it's something that I need to take action on. You can, flip through all these tabs on your computer. It's the same thing with like having those open files in your mind, actually. If you have these unfinished tasks, your mind's always going through these unfinished things. Oh, I haven't finished all these, 50 things that I was working on. And now I'm going to start this new thing. So the shiny object syndrome is just being aware of the fact that it does exist. There are lots of things out there. I mean, sure, there's lots of noise, lots of marketing. People are always selling everything. It's like you just need to focus on what it is that you need to get your goal done. Like, what do you need to get this to accomplish this thing? That's it. If you're focused on that, then all this other stuff that's coming at you, you can just, you've got your force field on. You can just keep moving forward in a straight line, knowing exactly what your goal is. And anything that comes into your field of vision that is not related to that goal, you can just say, no, I don't need that right now. That's really the scope of the book is just, it's a book designed to, help you with your focus and also help you with your clarity, to manage the chaos that I think we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So,
Yeah, and I like the fact that you mentioned a force field because I think that's definitely fitting to, all the barrage of information and marketing that we get exposed to, especially as entrepreneurs,
mm,
scrolling through the algorithms on social media, Amazon, email lists, whatever. It's just insane right now. And I think you made a really excellent point about focusing on your goals. And I was wondering if you have any like good questions that you could ask that someone could ask themselves when they get tempted. Do you have any good questions they could ask themselves to help like reinforce that force field?
yeah, what I do is like for me, I make a list of, well, first of all, I always have my goals written down in a journal and I'm very clear on what they are, not just what my goal is, but what are the steps I need to get it and what if I'm using software or tools to help me get to this goal, then I need to know what those tools are. Because otherwise, I'll give you an example. The other day, I'm scrolling through Instagram or TikTok. Yeah, not a great use of your time, but it is a habit of mine. And I come across an ad for this AI software that can create your videos with an AI avatar. I thought, oh, that sounds great. That's just what I need to develop my course. Well, it actually wasn't. But next thing you know, I'm signing up for this thing, trying it out. Of course, it doesn't work very well. I'm getting frustrated with it. And I spent a few dollars on it maybe, and I realized, okay, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Well, actually, maybe I should have been scrolling through Instagram. So I'm kind of like walking through it going, the real reason I found that is because I was scrolling through Instagram, saw something really shiny that I thought could cut me a couple of corners. And I realized when I actually looked at it, this wasn't one of the things that was on my list of things needed to get my, to get my course built, right? Being really clear on what are the tasks required to get to your goal, but what are the tools required, and what, who's helping you with this as well? Because part of the shiny object syndrome is maybe, you're asking, maybe you're asking the wrong people to help you, or if I'm hiring somebody too, I need to be very clear on what the role is that I'm hiring for. Not so much the person to a certain extent, but I need to know like what the role is so that when I bring that person on board, I can be very clear, and well, they're very clear as to what the tasks are that they're doing. Otherwise, people without guidance are just like, they they go off track as well. They get doing things that are not beneficial for your business. So again, just coming back to your question, though, like clarity is the key. And I find that part of this is just spending time every evening. I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes just writing down my three priority tasks for the next day. And that way that keeps things on track, right? I think I read like somebody else said, you should do six, or I need to keep it simple. Like I might have three priority tasks for today. I might get one done. I might get two finished. Sometimes I get three of them done, but I think not having more than three and just being clear on what they are. Because if you know what your priorities are, anything else that comes into, like anything else, like those, I think my mentor defined it as like these little, like 80/20, by the way, like, knowing what your 80/20 is, right? Of course, like 80% of your results is like, that's going to come from 20% of your efforts. And that is the Pareto principle, probably the one thing that I try to live by every day. I've actually got two circles that I make. And in these two circles is the 80% circle. I make a list of all the things that are like fall within that 80%. In other words, things that I don't need to be paying attention to. It could be like, email and like all these things that are like stealing our time and our focus. And the 20%, that's where my priorities are. So I would definitely recommend to anybody just making those circles, get them down on paper. And you need to identify what they are so that you don't fall into that trap.
Great stuff. Great stuff there. And I would just add on to it just a little bit. Um, Questions you could ask yourself along the way is, once you've got your goal defined, you understand what the steps are to that goal. When those shiny objects start flashing in your eyes, and they will, it's not going to stop. Just like the money thing, it's a muscle that you have to work out. When those shiny objects start flashing in your eye, you can ask yourself the simple question: does this help me with the
Mm,
step that I'm currently on? Not
yeah.
does it help me with the big old hairy vision? Does this
Mm,
thing help me right now with what I need to be doing?
yeah.
And if the answer is no, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, great question. And yeah, if I think the one question I ask myself is that question. And is this going to matter tomorrow? So what I'm
Hmm.
trying to get into the habit of doing is just putting it off for 24 hours. I look back now at some of the things that I bought into. I remember like a few years ago, I paid someone like, 10 grand to build out a funnel for me on ClickFunnels. And it's one of those things where I just kind of jumped right into it thinking, I need a funnel. And if I just waited 24 hours, I can tell you right now, I wouldn't have done that. Like wasn't one of those things that I needed. I was just in this kind of mindset at the time, or this frame of mind where I was willing to just try anything to get my business, to jumpstart my business again. I started jumping at all these things that would look really good. When on the surface, if I just waited 24 to 48 hours, probably wouldn't have done it. So, like, yeah, just ask yourself, yeah, is this something that I'm going to need tomorrow?
Another great question. All right. Well, Scott, I know you've got to get running. You're a busy guy. So just real quick, where can people find you? Where can they get into your world, find your books? Let us know.
Absolutely. Yes, they can visit our website at scottallenbooks.com. I'm selling everything directly on there. And of course, they can find things on, Amazon sells a lot of stuff. They can find me on there as well. Or just plug into Google, Scott Allen, author or books, and I'm sure you can find other interviews I've done and a lot of the other products. So any questions, people can reach out to me at Scott Allen at scottallenpublishing.com.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, all those links are going to be below, guys. And before you go, Scott, I want to give you just one thing talking about synchronicities in the universe. Listening to you talk, reading your material, you enabled a flow I now have the first outline of my book, my first book, completely done. And it was listening to you that set that in motion. So thank you.
Fantastic. I'm glad I could help.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, you know what to do. Like the video, share the video with your friends. You never know what kind of a positive impact you can have with just a simple share. I really appreciate you, Scott. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
It's been great having me on the show. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Peace. We'll see you in the next one.